This is Swarfcast. I'm Noah Graff. I am very honored to be with Roger Duffy, owner of F&F Machine in Elkhart, Indiana. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Thank you.
I have known Roger a few years now. He has bought several Tsugamis from Graff-Pinkert, and from the time I met him, he had been talking about being an entrepreneur and having different companies, and he's an interesting person, somebody to know if you're interested in business. So it made sense for me to interview him. So just to get started, I want a quick bio. How did you get into this industry? How did you get to own F&F Machine? Start from the beginning.
Sure. So, got married very early. I was 19 years old, and
Whoa.
yeah. So I was fortunate enough to buy a house on a land contract from a fellow I went to, a guy that was old enough to be my father, that I went to church with, and I thought I was just going to rent the house from him, and he says, "Well, I don't want to rent the house to you. I want to sell it to you." I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry, I don't have any money." He said, "If you have money to rent, you have money to buy." And I'm like, "I do?" So he says to me, "You got to have the survey done. You got to have the title insurance done and the home inspected." I'm like, "Well, I don't know how to do that." He goes, "You will. When you're done, you will." And so, he threw me out there, and I had to learn it. And consequently, when I had it surveyed, I followed these people around like a puppy, and I just kept asking them all kinds of questions. At the time, I was a welder, and I worked in a fab shop welding, and didn't really like the job, but I was good at it, and it was good money, and I was cranking it out, but I wanted some change. So
You
they
were in
said,
Elkhart, Indiana at the time?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and they said to me, the surveyors said, "Hey, you seem awfully interested in this type of work. You should put in an application. We're hiring an apprentice." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, not even sure what that word means, but I'll go put an application in, and I got the job. Well, it was great, except for the
What kind
fact
of
that
company was this?
land surveying.
Land surveying. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to have my house the property surveyed, and the guy that sold it to me on a land contract told me I had to be responsible for that. So that's how I met these surveyors, and
Interesting.
yeah, and I went and applied for the job, and I got the job, and I learned it really quick, and the owner was growing, and he told me, he says, "Hey, you've learned this job so fast. I'd like to hire a couple more people and let them work for you, and you can have your own crew."
Oh, wow. He really
And,
must have
and
saw something in you.
yeah, I adapted to it fast, and I loved the work. Consequently, though, I did it for 2 years, almost 2.5 years, from being 19 to 21, 22 years old. The problem was I'm newly married. I got a house, and I was out of town. We traveled, and I was out of town Monday through Friday, and that part I hated. So I knew this. So I knew the guy that owned F&F, and um, I stopped at his house on the way home from work on a Friday, and I said, "Hey, man, do you ever think I could get a job working in your shop?" He goes, "Well, you got any machine experience?" And I'm like,
What kind of
"I took
shop was it at the time? All brown and sharp?
all Brown and Sharp screw machine strictly." Yeah, we didn't even have a Bridgeport end mill. It was all screw machine work, and so I. I asked him. He said, "Well, if you had experience, I'd probably hire you." And I said, "Well, I took shop class in school, and I actually won an award. And the project that I did in shop class, I won first place. Anyways, didn't mean anything to him. And so he about 2 weeks went by, and he had just hired a young fellow about my age, and he ended up having a terrible accident, and he lost his life.
Whoa.
And so Blake, the owner of F&F at the time, called me. He says, "Hey, are you still interested in that job?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't have any more experience that I had 2 weeks ago."
Serendipity. It's kind
Yeah.
of a
So he gave me a job, and and I started out doing second operation, where you just pick a part up and put it in the machine over and over and over. There was a pan of parts that had probably 50,000 pieces, this little parts. And I ran that job for about a week. And I asked him at the end of the week, I said, "Are you putting more parts in that pan?" He said, "No." "Why? Why do you ask?" I said, "I've worked on this for a week and I haven't put a dent in it." I said, "Look, man, I appreciate this job, but I can't do this. If this is the job, I quit." And he goes, "Oh, you'll be all right. You just go back out there and keep running." Well, every once in a while, the machine would have a hiccup, and I watched him fix the machine. And so as time went on, I mean, I ran this job probably for 3 weeks. I started working on the machine and doing what he did when it had a problem. And he caught me. He goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, the center drill backed off, or it got dull, and I sharpened it and I'm putting it back in." He goes, "How do you know how to do that?" And I said, "Well, I watched you do it."
mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Are you serious? You should take that drill out and show me how you did that." So I took it out, and we took the drill back to the grinder, and he takes the drill and he puts it in the grinder, and he just ruins it. He goes, "Now sharpen that." So I did. I sharpened it. He goes, "Wow." He goes, "I've never had anybody do that before, and especially with no experience." He goes, "You must have a natural talent for this." So he started showing me how to set up. And so I would go out there. He called me off the second operation job. "Hey, come here. I want to show you something." He goes, "You see that gear? That's gear on the drive shaft. That's first gear on the stud, second gear on the stud, and the worm shaft. Remember, the worm shaft's on the bottom where worms are. Worms are in the bottom." I'm like, "I'm never going to learn this stuff."
Is
Well,
okay. Let me stop you a second.
yeah.
Setting up a Brown and Sharp. It's a bit of an art, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I still have 30 of them. And let me tell you, there 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 isn't another machine out there, bang for the buck, that can do what a Brown and Sharp can do. Let me tell you. It's no accident that they're still around. They're a very, very efficient machine, but that's the hard part, is getting talent behind them. Today is that's the art now, is getting somebody to run one. It's impossible. If you get a guy and train a guy with experience, you got to keep a warm blanket on them and keep them very happy, because those machines, that department alone probably does $1 million a year by itself.
All right, all right.
And
Back up, back up, back up. We're going to talk about that. Go back to the story. I love this
so go
story.
back to the story. So I learned how to set up quite quickly, and I will say that it was a God given talent, because I'm just naturally mechanical,
Yeah.
and I was able to learn from the owner by watching him, because he was a terrible teacher. He wasn't a guy that he wasn't a guy that could explain what he was doing. He'd just say, "All right, I'm going to change this from a single index to a double index, and this is the Genesis wheel, and you take this roller out and you put this roller here, and you have a tapered pin. You can only put it in one way and take it out one way, and all right, now you can go back to what you're doing." And I was like getting little bits and pieces, and I'm like, "I'm never going to learn this." But once I got into it full time, I learned it, and I became very, very good at it. And then I started reading a book, and it had a lot of good pictures. It's not because I'm smart, but it just had a lot of good pictures. And I learned from pictures and watching, and I learned how to make layouts. I learned how to make my own cams. And so I was within a year, inside of a year, I was setting up by myself and making full layouts for Brown and Sharps. And the owner was so enthusiastic about me that he sat me down after I was here for probably a year and a half or so, and he says, I want to sell you 10% of this business.
Wow.
And I'm like, I have no money. I mean, you know what money I have. You're paying me, and
I feel like I'm seeing a parallel with the whole surveying thing. You told him you didn't have
yeah,
any money, and
yeah. Well, buying the house, yeah. Well,
yeah.
ironically, the owner of the surveying company, when I put my notice in to come to F&F Machine Products, he said, "You can't quit. I've got too much invested in you. You can't quit. You run a whole crew for me." He goes, "You can't quit." He goes, "Roger, do you understand? I want to sell you this company." I'm like, "You want to sell me the surveying company? I can't do that." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you went to college. I can't go to college. I barely made it out of high school, and I know you got to have at least a civil engineering degree to be a certified surveyor." He goes, "As an owner, you hire those people. You don't have to do it." And I said, "Yeah, but I think that's great, but I, I don't. I didn't know how to file that. I didn't know how to file what he was telling me, that he wanted me to stay and continue to grow with his business and then sell it to me. He followed me to my car every day for 2 weeks and begged me not to quit. And the last day, he told me, he says, "You're going to end up owning something. Wherever you go, you're going to end up owning something." Again, I didn't know how
Wow.
to. I was young. I was 22 years old. I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to put that in my head. So I go to work at F&F, and within a year, I was a 10% owner. And
Wow.
and and he gave what he did. He goes, "I'm going to give you a bonus, and then you're basically going to give me. I'm going to let you keep this much of it, but you're giving it back to me as part of the payment for your 10%." And that went on for 5 years. It took me 5 years to pay for the 10%. But now, I'm 27 years old. We had 13 screw machines. The screw machine shop was a little pig pen, to be nice. It started in 1959. I came in 1986. There was 4 people. I was the fifth person. It was just a little shop, 13 screw machines, and about 5 of those screw machines were second operation machines, and the other 8 were production machines. And they
Okay.
were in a 5,000 square foot building, hodgepodge here, there, and everywhere. And I seen pictures of screw machines all lined up in a line. And I thought, man, that's the coolest thing. And so I said, "How do you even move these machines?" His name is Blake, the owner. He goes, "Well, we take the hoist down. We had a hoist on a beam that we unloaded trucks, our steel, and we wrap a log chain around the machine, and then we drill a hole in the floor and put a pin in it, hook the chain and the hoist to it, and we pull it across the shop. And that's how we move them, because we had no room for a forklift, and we didn't even own a forklift. So I would stay late at night without his permission, because I asked him, I said, "You think I could move that machine over here?" "No, leave it alone, leave it alone." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm part owner here. I can do this." So I learned early on it was easier to get forgiveness than it was permission. So I would stay late and move like 2 or 3 machines until I got them all where I wanted them. And it took me, a couple months to get it the way I wanted it. And then he'd come in the next morning and see these machines moved. And he goes, "I told you not to move it." I said, "Yeah, but look at them. Man, isn't that nice? They're all lined up." Consequently, I started cleaning the shop up. In 6 years, I went from 13 screw machines to 32 Brown and Sharp
Wow.
screw machines in that shop. I had 4 lines of machines in that shop. And the reason I went to 32 machines is because every time the phone rang and there was a problem with a part, he would send me over to the customer to take care of it, because more than likely I ran the parts, and our quality system was me. I mean, the guy that was stocking machines for me after I got them set up, and me, checking the parts as
How
we
many
ran
people
them.
did you have working for you?
I had like three ladies that did second operation, and I had one guy that helped stock up machines, and I was teaching another guy how to set up. So just a handful. And then every time I went to a customer, by the way, we were 95% musical instrument parts.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And Elkhart at the time was known as the music capital of the world. I mean, there's
What?
all kinds of musical companies here in Elkhart, all kinds. Anyways, and they're still here, but they don't make the student line, which is the high production stuff.
What stuff in musical instruments were you making?
So all the hardware on a clarinet, a flute, a trumpet, a bassoon, all the woodwind and brass wind, there's all kinds of little knobs and screws, and we made all that stuff, and we made it for all the companies here in Elkhart. So when I would go to the customer for a problem or whatever they wanted, I would put my sales hat on. I'm like, hey, who's making? They had their desk full of stuff, and I'd pick a part out and pick it up and say, hey, who's making that for you? And this one particular guy, he says, you want to make that? He says, all right, you go back and quote this. And I'd run back there with that part to Blake, and I'm like, Blake, I want to quote this part. They said, quote this part, and I want you to get it. And we would get it, job after job after job after job. And that's how I'd say, Blake, we need another machine. He says, go buy it. So I go buy a
So
machine.
wait, you cut out for a second. I just want to make sure I understood. So you'd go out there to solve some problem, and then you'd talk to them
Come
about
back.
parts they were making, and you'd come back with a new part.
Yeah, come back with more work.
Serendipity.
Yeah, you bet. And at its finest. And so what happened is,
It's amazing.
more work demanded more equipment. So
Yeah.
every time I needed another screw machine, I couldn't keep up. I'd tell Blake, hey, I need another machine. And he would say, go buy it. He trusted me 100% at this time. I was his golden goose laying
What
golden
year?
eggs.
What year is this right now?
Now we're probably into the mid to late 90s. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How
The
much did Brown
90s
and
for
Sharps
sure.
cost back then? Cut 10, 20
You know,
grand?
it's so funny you say that because we went through a spell in the 90s where a G series Brown and Sharp could demand eight to $12,000. And an Ultramatic would probably cost you 15 to 20. Yeah. So,
I want you to time out for 1 second.
yeah.
For the people listening to this who aren't familiar with Brown and Sharps, I want the 1 to 2 minute summary of how it works. A lot of the people listening to this, they operate just single spindle CNC lathes or mills, or give me, it's a screw machine, it's single spindle, it's,
A
I
screw
don't know,
machine is a lathe,
it's still a
Yeah.
mystery to me in a way.
So, I mean, a screw machine is nothing more than an automatic lathe. Anything that you can imagine making on a lathe, only instead of one part at a time, you set it up. It's got cams that run the slides, and so there's a turret slide with 6 to 8 tools in it, 6 to 8 positions depending on the turret, and then there's a front slide which a form tool can come in, a back slide which a cutoff can come on, or you can form thread roll, and a vertical slide for cutting off. So you could form thread roll, vertical cutoff. Simultaneous, the turret slide can come in and drill a hole, maybe thread a hole,
And the
whatever.
turret is like perpendicular to
Yeah,
which is different from when most people think of a turret on like a CNC lathe.
Right, like a slant bed comes in from the side or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in line with the spindle. It does everything on center. Now you can have an offset tool that can come in and turn, like a single point turn from the turret. And then it would index, to the stop, and it would feed out to length. Index, center drill, index, drill, index, thread, index. And while it's doing the turret work, you can come in from the front slide and the back slide and the vertical slide. So form, thread roll, cut off while you're doing, you know. And so I have a part that went in a flute. I ran 300,000 of them a year. It was just a little threaded brass part with a 172 thread and an ID. It would feed out, index, center drill, index recess, the back side of the hole, index, thread, form, cut off in 3.25 seconds.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, how fast are they? 3.5 seconds?
All that in 3.25 seconds. You couldn't begin to do that on the fastest CNC they make. You know,
that's incredible.
They're quite amazing. I wish there was an industry out there that looked at the Brown and Sharpe and said, that would be a fantastic CNC machine.
Lyco.
Well, Lyco is very, very close. Problem is, they're $300,000 machines.
But that's what it is that you're talking about, right?
It is exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, Lyco is a beautiful machine. Beautiful machine. They have 4 slides, you can get them, and 2 turrets. So they can pick off and do work on the back turret from the turret while it's doing work on the 4 slides. It's amazing. It's a great machine.
Here's what I don't understand. You talked about it, and everybody talks about it when they talk about Brown and Sharpes. You have to make a new cam from scratch when you're doing a part. I mean, I just think cam's like on a normal multi-spindle, and it's just that's what's there.
So, it's not that hard to make a cam. However, it's that's what.
But controls, why do you have to make a cam? I don't even know.
That's what controls the slide. So, on a CNC, you would give it how many inches a minute, and how many, you would set the RPMs, how many revs per minute on the turn, surface feet, and how many inches per minute on the push of the tool.
Okay.
You're going to program that in with numbers, and in the X and the Y and the Z. So on a Brown and Sharpe, you have these fixed slides that's going to come in on the X, right?
Yeah.
And then on the Z from the turret, well, it's got to know how far to come in. So you make if it's a half inch and you're in 10 seconds and you figure your feeds and speeds, then your rise on the cam is going to be so many hundreds. There's 100 hundreds in a cam. So, and it's all timed. It's like building an engine. It really is. It's like building an engine. So when you build the engine, you have what you call a timing chain. So the timing chain is got this sprocket on the crank and a sprocket on the camshaft. And so there's a chain that wraps around that, and it's timed so that when those pistons are firing, the valves are opening and closing in time. Well, a screw machine's the same way. You got your turret slide coming in, which is your main cam, for however many positions there is on that turret, that's how many lobes there are on the cam, the lead cam. And then the cross slide cams are just one lobe, and they're the length of what allows you to get in and out without crashing it. Everything's got to be timed. It's really cool. It really is. It's a beautiful piece of art that has stood the test of time. What happened though in the 90s, early 2000s, was there was a company called
AMT?
ServoCam.
Oh,
AMT.
ServoCam. Yeah.
AMT came along and they invented what they call a ServoCam. They literally took the lead cam away from the Brown and Sharpe, and they incorporated a ball screw, a programmable ball screw. So now the turret will go in and out all by programming it, just like a CNC. And so that was the first thing they did. And then they made it so that you can set auto trippers. The trippers is what indexes it from position to position. And so you have trippers for the turret, and you have trippers for the feed and the clutch. And they made that all automated. So they went.
And you were pretty into this.
I was. When I seen it, I thought, boy, if that thing works like they said it does, I'll buy one. Well, they were like $25,000. And at the time, I had 60 screw machines.
$25,000 in what, the late 90s? So that's
Early 2000s. Yeah,
all
early
right. So that's
2000s.
like what,
Yeah.
$40,000 now, probably.
Oh, probably.
Yeah. So
And
it's, I mean,
and
it's you know,
yeah,
it's not cheap
no. So I had
for a
about
Brown and Sharp.
at the time I bought that machine, I had probably 20 double O's, which is a half-inch machine, and I probably had 40 number twos, which is half inch and up to 2 3/8 through the spindle. And I bought one for a double O. I bought a servo cam and put it on the servo. I had this much training on it for my guys at the time. And at this time, I'm literally just the plant manager running the shop. I would
Right.
help troubleshoot and make layouts and things like that. But I had guys that were setting up and had a lot of guys. At that time, I had probably 25 people, and probably five of those guys were setup guys, and probably five of the guys were, people that stocked up the machines and kept them fed and pulled chips and kept oil in them and all that. And so it's quite an operation, all screw machines. And um, I bought this because the average setup on a screw machine is 4 to 6 hours. That's even if
On a Brown and Sharp.
on a Brown and Sharp, and that's if you that's even if you've already ran it once. It's still going to be about 4 hours.
What if it's like a family of parts? Still like,
I mean,
or is that
if
not
it's
how
just
it
going
works
from
with Brown and Sharp?
you can have a family of parts if you're going like different lengths, but if you're changing stock size, it's a little more to it. But still, the average was 4 hours, no matter what. And they're saying ServoCam's saying you can set this job up in 45 minutes. Well, that got my attention
Yeah.
because I got all these setup guys and all these machines, and the setups were just killing me. And so I thought it would give them a new fresh wind in their sail. It did me, but it didn't precipitate. My guys treated that thing like a stepchild. They didn't they. There it sat on an island by itself, and they would not run it. In fact, I was sorry I bought it. And I mean, short of me going out there and running it, it wasn't going to run.
Why can't you just why can't you just say this is what you're doing?
I did, but it's just not that easy sometimes. So I
I believe you.
yeah, I'm a ramrod, and I can push things through, but it's just like the old saying: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. I mean, anyways, the sales guy, they hired a new guy at AMT, and he actually invested in the business. And
Greg Knight?
No, Howard Hubert. Greg came from a screw machine shop, and he helped him learn the anatomy of a Brown and Sharp. Smart guy, did a good job. But anyways, so Howard comes to my shop, and he says, "Hey, I understand that you bought a servo cam. When are you ready to buy another one?" I'm like, "Look, man, I'll sell you that one back." And so he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my guys won't run it. They just won't run it. They're just not familiar enough with it, and I can't." He goes, "How about I bring a guy here for a week at my expense, and you give me two of your guys undivided attention." He goes, "I'll have them guys fighting over that thing." I said,
Wow.
"Done."
Wow.
I said, "Done." So that's exactly what happened. And I'm not kidding you. My guys were begging me to buy another one.
That is so interesting. So how did they convince them?
They trained them. They just trained them on it, got them familiar with it, showed them how easy it was.
So it wasn't that your guys were just like, sentimental about their old screw machines?
Yeah, it was just too unknown. And we just couldn't break through that shell. But when we did, it was exactly what he said. And I ended up buying 5. I bought a package of 5 of them. And then I
Yeah.
turned around and bought another package of 5 of them. And then I turned around and bought another package of 5
You
of
were
them.
probably their best customer.
I ended up being a quite large customer. And then they started to have, generation one, generation two, generation three, and they really took it a long way. They really did. They made a full CNC machine. And at the time they did that, they went out of business. And it's unfortunate because,
This was AMT,
yeah,
servo cam.
yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, the guys that owned it, they took on Lyco. They
Yeah.
they, they ended up being a distributor for Lyco. And so now they had a real conflict. Do I sell Lyco or Brown and Sharp? I mean, so, it was kind of a real conflict. So, and then they just, there was too many chiefs. There was just too many hands in the pot, and they didn't know how to reinvest in what they had. And you know what? They stood the test of time. I still run them every day. I think I got better than 25 of them. I think I got, on the 30 machines I have, I think all but 5 of them have servo on them.
Why do you think that there are so few people? I mean, in my experience, most of the people who run Brown and Sharps don't run servo, or they have only one or two. And
For the same reason, well, one, they're out of business now, so, they're afraid to buy it. There's no support.
yeah,
I've had to learn how to fix them myself and find other people that can fix them. So I've been fortunate enough to keep them going. And so, that's how we roll. And you can still, there's still places that will refurbish a Brown and Sharp.
yeah,
But it's quite expensive to do, and you got to always say, do I put money? They stopped making Brown and Sharps in the '80s, the late '80s,
you can
and Brown
buy
and
one
Sharp,
for you can buy one for $1,500,
you
$2,000.
you
I don't
you
know if it'll be
can
good, but
right. Yeah, that's, you don't know what you're going to get, but if I can completely rebuild a Brown and Sharp, the spindle, the transmission, everything, and you can buy repair parts for them to this day. But the time and the money, you ask yourself, do I do that? Or do I just invest in something with later technology that has support out there? Because the bigger you get, the less you can do personally. You got to run your business, and you can't run it from the inside. You have to be able to run it from the top so you can see everything. It's nice to be involved and on the inside because, it's better than just being reported to. And I'm a hands-on guy, so I'm here. But
yeah.
you can't, I can't go out there and rebuild
Well,
machines. I don't have time.
this is what I was going to ask you about. I mean, this seems a story that we run into all the time with people who start their own shop, and particularly somebody like you that is a natural mechanic and likes to get your hands dirty. Was it a difficult transition for you to get to delegate, to get to the more businessy side? Or I was interviewing another guy with a company the other day, and he was a robot programmer, and the way he said it was, well, I'm a programmer, and so I used my skills to create a system for my business, kind of like programming a robot. Do you feel that way for your company? It's like you used the same muscle in your brain to create a business that you would running a machine, or it's not like that?
I would like to say that I had this ingenious plan, but I didn't. I mean, I like a lot of balls in the air. I like
Yeah.
risk, and I like to take on challenges and then figure out how I'm going to do them, which scares a lot of people. I I'm not afraid to invest in equipment and different equipment. I've learned though, in the machining world, it's so large that you really got to stick to what complements your core. You can get into all kinds of things. I could get into welding and metal fabricating, and it's machining to a point, but it doesn't really complement my turning abilities and my milling abilities. I'm a turn mill shop, and some of my machines turn and mill. And all my Swiss, I have 15 Swiss machines. They can turn
Right. So
and mill,
you have
and I have,
quite a few Tsugamis.
yes,
We've
they're all
sold you
Sagamis.
several.
Yeah. And we have, 15 vertical mills that we do a lot of fourth axis and work on. And we're getting into five axis, we're getting into aerospace. And so you have to surround yourself. And I've learned this the hard way because I used to think that I had to touch everything. Uh, I'm a natural boss. I don't have a problem delegating. I don't apologize, to do my job. I'm like, hey, I need you to do this and you to do that, and it all gets done. But I've made my share of mistakes by being too much of a ramrod, and so I've learned how to be more of a diplomat, to get more out of people, and to really. I used to take like some of my best machinists and turn them into bosses, and that's not necessarily the right way to go. Just
Yeah.
because you're good at machining doesn't mean you're good at being a boss, manager. So I've had to learn that, make sure people are in the right seat, and because you get the right, when you get the person in the right seat, they'll shine. They'll shine. And so I've had to learn, like when I'm on the threshold of getting rid of somebody because of my disappointment and what they're doing, I've had to learn to ask myself, did they fail me or did I fail them? Because sometimes I fail people by not giving them what they need to shine.
That's a very astute. It sounds like
Well, it
you're.
allows me to go to bed at night with a clean conscience because I've made my mistakes and gotten rid of people out of anger, out
Yeah.
of, them screwing up time and time again. And then me being purely frustrated and saying, this ain't working and let them go. I've hired people back and given them second chances and put them in different positions and they've shined. And that's how I've learned to make sure that people are in the right spot. Because why did you fail the first time, but now you're succeeding the second time? Well, it's because you're in a position that you understand better. And I've given you better resources to understand it. So it's
It
kind of
makes me
both.
think of the Brown and Sharp story, the Servo Brown and Sharp story.
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah. If you don't
people
know.
weren't put in a position to succeed,
Yeah.
and then you did,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, it worked.
And see, I would dare say that what maybe makes me a little bit different is most people they fear the unknown. I run to it. I like it. I like
Definitely seems like that.
the surprise of it all. And I make a mess and clean it up. I love to clean up a mess. I love to make order out of chaos. I love a clean shop. I love things to be organized. I mean, I'm so OCD sometimes. I at dinner I'll line my French fries up. I'm from
But the
large to small.
ironic thing is, you're not
Yeah.
afraid to first have it messy. To
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm not. I am attracted to messes because I know I can make it better. I'm a visionary. I like to. You know. Sit. There's a guy that I can't remember his name, but he says I get my best ideas from staring at the wall.
hmm
He goes, just try it. Just stare at the wall for a while. Just take 3 minutes. It'll seem like an eternity. Completely quiet and just stare at the wall and
okay,
just
I need
listen
to
to your
try it,
and just listen to your brain. And so I'll do that. I'll stand in my shop and I'll just stare at something.
and
You
that works
know.
for you.
Oh, of course it does. Yeah, it works
It's
great for
probably the
me.
same kind of thing as like in being in the shower and
Yeah,
like.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's just a way of concentrating on something. But yeah, I like a mess. I like a challenge. I like the unknown. I'm an entrepreneur at heart.